Interviews and commentaries are for entertainment only. The views and opinions expressed therein are those of the individual speakers and callers and do not necessarily represent the views of KFAR Radio or any of our respective employees, affiliates, or sponsors of this program.
Problems, problems, problems all day long. Will my problems work out right or wrong? My baby don't like anything I do. My teacher seems to feel the same.
Good morning, Fairbanks. You're listening to 660 AM Radio, KFAR. This is Problem Corner, and I'm your host, David Pruhs. My format is on Mondays, it's business and economics that affect Fairbanks. On Tuesdays, it's my politics day, so my guests will be based around that. Wednesday is an interesting Fairbanks and pioneer local legend or nefarious character. And Friday is all about Fairbanks, the opportunities we get to do over the weekend, and what makes Fairbanks a very special town. My job is to introduce the planet, the world, to the wonderful world of Fairbanks. We will try to get to your phone calls, but sometimes our conversations just don't stop, so please be patient with us. You can call us at 458-TALK or 458-8255. And with that, on this very fine Monday, I will introduce my guest, who was actually just the last advertiser we had here, and we were sort of laughing about that. Brad Keithley, how you doing this morning, sir?
David, I'm doing great. The sun's out. It's bright and shiny. I've spent the weekend in Fairbanks. I'm just doing great.
What brought you up here besides this incredible show?
Well, of course, this was the anchor tenant of the trip. But Fairbanks Concert Association. I'm a huge fan of the Fairbanks Concert Association and everything they do. They had a show Friday night, Rhythm Future Quartet, at Herring Auditorium was just outstanding. And then Saturday night, they had another event down in Healy. It's sort of a part of their outreach to Healy, and had an event down at 229 Restaurant. Rhythm Future Quartet went down and played. Laura Cole, who's the chef down there, prepared appetizers and desserts. It was wonderful.
Well, welcome to the interior. Greatly appreciate it. How long have you been in Alaska now?
Well, there's two answers to that. I started coming up in the early 1990s. I'm an oil and gas lawyer by training, and I started coming up in the early 1990s dealing with projects. I actually moved up to Anchorage for a couple of years in the mid-90s, 95 and 96. Then my work took me back outside. But I kept I was the head of the oil and gas group at the law firm I was at. I kept calling my own number on Alaska projects, kept coming back up here. And by the early 2000s, I was up here roughly 3 weeks out of 4. I would go back home to make sure my house hadn't burned down. So I finally moved up here permanently in 2007.
So basically for, we can say, last 20, 25 years, you've followed the economics of Alaska, this through your industry, the oil industry, and being an attorney for it.
Deeply, deeply.
And that's what brought you into as being one of the, what I would say, one of the more educated people with our revenue situation and our expense situation.
Well, not everybody would say that, but I appreciate the compliment. And yes, I mean, it started, basically my career has been as a deal lawyer on oil and gas issues. Sometimes that shows up in regulatory arenas, sometimes in litigation, sometimes in commercial transactions. But to be a deal lawyer, you have to understand the fiscal environment, particularly in the oil and gas industry, you have to understand the fiscal environment. So I've followed it very closely since I started coming up here. And in the late 2009, 2010, as I saw spending rising in the state and spent a lot of time talking to and working with Scott Goldsmith at the University of Alaska Anchorage Institute of Social and Economic Research, one of the best economists in the state, I really got to know it a lot better.
Okay. And you've been up here a few times giving talks on what you believe the state should be doing on the revenue and the expense side and the issues that have happened. I had the governor in here about a month ago, and the way I portrayed it to him, I thanked him a couple times for having some continuity with the budget people that he has, and also said that when you ran for governor, oil was at $105 a barrel. When you were elected, it was still at $105 a barrel. When you were seated, it was at $28 a barrel. So what you've had as a term as a governor, something that no one anticipated or actually has really been through. So now comes a time where we have to adjust our budgets and actually adjust a philosophy. And I've heard your philosophy and I like it. So let's start going into what your philosophical way of what Alaska should be doing with their budget.
Well, as I've been involved in the economics and certainly talking to Scott Goldsmith, I've read a lot. I've read everything I can get my hands on about Alaska economic issues, both past and present. And one has really stood out over time, Jay Hammond's thoughts with respect to the permanent fund, how the permanent fund should be used, what the permanent fund's for, and how it helps Alaska out. And so basically my approach has been to go back to that, because I think Jay understood the state, frankly, in a way that a lot of people didn't, and go back to that and sort of use that as a starting point and look at what Hammond had to say and what Hammond's thoughts were around how to use the permanent fund as a way of helping deal with what he foresaw as a day when oil would no longer be sufficient to carry the state alone.
And the economic stimulus that provides every year.
It does. Certainly. I mean, what Jay's original vision was, there's a great quote in his last book, Diapering the Devil. There's a great quote in there that goes something to the effect of, I wanted to create money wells out of our oil wells. So he wanted to take the revenue coming from the oil wells, put it into the permanent fund, create the permanent fund, and create money wells out of that would produce earnings. And then with the earnings, he wanted to do two things with it. One was the permanent fund dividend, 50%, one half would go to the permanent fund dividend, and the economic effect that would have on the state. And then the other half, he envisioned even when they did the permanent fund, and certainly when he wrote the book, the other half would be available to help fund government for essential government services once oil was no longer sufficient to do so.
Yeah, they called it, as I was talking to the three senators on Friday, it was originally viewed as the rainy day fund, that one day the revenue from the oil will dissipate and dry up, and therefore we are building up a savings account to pay for government from that. Yeah,
there's a lot of different things that are said about the creation of the permanent fund. I've spent a lot of time trying to understand what Jay meant. Jay had in mind, talked to Tillian and others who were there at the time. And Jay always envisioned it as having two roles, not just the rainy day fund for state government, but also to produce earnings, revenues that would go into the pockets of individual Alaskans.
Yeah. Fairbanks, we are going to take a commercial break here. You are listening to KFAR Radio, 660 AM on your dial. This is Problem Corner. We have Brad Keithley, economist, exceptional person, wonderful visitor, and I'm your host, David Pruhs, and we'll be back in a few.
This is Problem Corner on KFAR 660 AM.
Your new home is waiting at Birchwood Homes. Their 3, 4, and 5-bedroom units are move-in ready. Stop searching and get moving. They are a pet-friendly community that accepts all dog breeds, so no need to stress about Fido. Heat is included in your rent, garages on every unit, and they're located right outside Fort Wainwright. Take Trainer Gate to F Street and follow the leasing signs, or visit birchwoodhomesak.com to learn more. Birchwood Homes, giving your family the warmest of welcomes.
When you're on the road and the unexpected happens, the last thing you should have to worry about is a big penalty on your next insurance bill. That's why Umalic includes the penalty-free promise, so your personal insurance rates never go up due to tickets or accidents. And with Umalic, you can insure not only your vehicles, but also your home and your business with the local company Alaskans have trusted for over 35 years. So put those penalties in the rearview mirror. Ask your independent agent today for Umalic. That's U-M-I-A-L-I-K. Umalic Insurance. Peace of mind made in Alaska.
You and your family have so much to see. Read the fine print. Drive safely. The wonder of a sunrise. Looking into the eyes of a loved one. Protect your precious vision. Call the Eye Clinic of Fairbanks for your appointment today. Their team of ophthalmologists, optometrists, and opticians offer medical and surgical eye and vision care, prescription lenses, and fashion eyewear. For your perfect vision, call 456-7760. 456-7760. The Eye Clinic of Fairbanks. Your eye health professionals on Minnie Street. Visit online eyeclinicoffairbanks.com.
You have a new business and now you need customers. Well, that's where we come in. We're Last Frontier Media Active, the radio station. Our brand new state-of-the-art broadcast studios on 5th Avenue are some of the finest recording facilities in the state. And we have created success stories from countless local businesses that keep coming back to us again and again. Why? Because we get results. Call 451-5910. We are the radio station, your local family of radio stations.
Weather brought to you by Bigfoot Pumping and Thawing, offering 24-hour service from Salcha to Nenana and no mileage charge on callouts. The Bigfoot with the helping hand. Bigfoot Pumping and Thawing.
And now, more Problem Corner on 660 AM KFAR.
Welcome back, Fairbanks. You're listening to Problem Corner, 660 AM. I'm your host, David Pruhs. We have in the studio here with us Brad Keithley. We're talking about the fiscal economics of Alaska's budget, the expenses, the income. And Brad, you brought up the 50-50 concept.
Right. So Hammond's original concept was, as I was explaining before, was to create the permanent fund, and he called that money wells, that he was going to take oil revenues, put it in the permanent fund, and create money wells, which would be the permanent fund producing earnings. And then of those earnings, 50% would go to the permanent fund dividend, would be shared with Alaska citizens, and the other 50% would be available for essential government services when oil was no longer sufficient. That has been, some people don't quite understand the economic effect of the permanent fund dividend, but the permanent fund dividend has been a huge stimulus to the Alaska economy. And as the permanent fund has grown, to the private sector of the Alaska economy, and as the permanent fund dividend has grown, it has helped grow the Alaska economy. ISER, Institute of Social and Economic Research, did an analysis last year looking at various things. What would cutting state employees, cutting the capital budget, having an income tax, having a sales tax, all sorts of various fiscal options. And of all those fiscal options, cutting the PFD had the worst effect on overall Alaska income of all of the options. And it put conversely, it has the PFD of all those options has the best impact, most positive impact on the Alaska economy of all the options.
You know, it's interesting. I'm looking at the House and the Senate and the governor, and you have three different areas there that must come together on a budget. And then you have the House and the Senate. In the House, you have the Democrat majority that is looking at multiple taxes, and then you have a Senate majority that even they're split on how they voted for their budget, because they had three people from the majority that went with the minority saying no, and we believe we're going to vote against this because we don't believe in what you're doing to the permanent dividend.
Right.
So, which is very rare.
It is, and those three were from the Valley and are probably the more conservative members of the legislature.
You think?
But I've talked to them over time, and I think they appreciate the role, the economic role that the permanent fund dividend plays in the Alaska economy, and see other options on how to deal with our current situation other than cutting the permanent fund dividend and doing that damage to the overall Alaska economy that doing that would do.
So, hearing some of your speeches, you're highlighting a sustainable budget, which everyone seems to use those buzzwords now, but you've been saying this for a while, and saying you're going to have fluctuations in your revenue. But make sure you don't have fluctuations in your expenses because of the fluctuations in your revenue. And you're taking your high revenue days and putting it away for your low revenue days and using that overage to pay for when you're at a loss, a negative balance.
Exactly right. And oil prices, I mean, the basic understanding that I've come to with the 35 years in the oil industry, and certainly looking at the Alaska economy or Alaska state government revenues, which are predicated on the oil industry, oil prices go up, oil prices go down, oil prices go back up, they go back down. I mean, it's a cyclical industry for reasons that are fairly easy to understand once you get inside it. And you know that whatever you're in, whatever regime you're in, oil price regime you're in at any given point in time, it's going to change. And if you've gone into a high cycle, you know you're going to have a low cycle. If you're in a low cycle, you know you're going to come out of that in a high cycle. And so, as I started getting into this and started talking to people like Scott Goldsmith, who truly has spent a lot of time studying it, I could see that if we spent when we went up, we weren't going to be prepared when we came back down into a low price oil cycle. And if we did bad things, or if we did things, to sort of scramble when we were in a low price cycle, like taxes or like PFD cuts, we were going to do harm that we didn't need to be doing, because we had we had been decent squirrels, put some nuts away during the winter, and we're prepared, or during the summer, and we're prepared for the winter. That's what Hammond's vision was with this other 50%, to have that available for government when oil was no longer sufficient. And in fact, the earnings reserve account that some people talk about, it's managed by the Permanent Fund Corporation. Some people talk about it as part of the Permanent Fund, but it's really a separate account. That earnings reserve is the past other 50% that Hammond intended for government that we didn't need, and in fact got saved over time.
Okay.
So there's about $12 billion between the Permanent Fund Earnings Reserve and the Constitutional Budget Reserve, which is another savings account. We've got about $12 billion in savings that is available to get us through this period of time. And oil economists are already seeing the potential for price recovery over time. So we're working ourselves, the industry's working itself out of this low price cycle. Alaska just needs to have patience as we go through this, so that we don't do damage to our economy while we're working through this low price cycle.
You ready for a phone call?
Sure.
Okay. Here we go, Fairbanks. Good morning. You're on KFAR Radio, Problem Corner with Brad Keithley, and your name is?
Randy.
Good morning, Randy. How are you doing?
Real good. I'm very interested, like many people, in seeing a balanced budget, because I think that's one of the fundamentals to go forward with. They say that a year ago and year before that, there was a lot of low-hanging fruit, easy to chop off, a lot of obvious fat to pick off and chop off. But as time goes on and they cut more and more, it becomes harder and harder. That's what I've heard them say anyway. And I imagine that in the minds of the people, it becomes fuzzier and fuzzier. Will a cut adversely affect me, or will it benefit me? Now, I'm all behind you as far as the cuts you want to make. I'm behind Tammy Wilson because I'm a highly motivated person, because there's been a ruling that I'm not allowed to even have a permanent fund dividend until there is a balanced budget. It's my own ruling on myself. But anyway, what do you think about the idea of having a small portion of the permanent fund dividend inversely proportional to the size of the deficit? In other words, $800, everybody gets no matter what, but 200 of that, 200 on top of that, is inversely proportional to the size of the deficit. If there's a $3 billion deficit, nothing. If it's a balance, then they get the full 200 plus the 800, something like that, some component. So to get people behind you and the cuts you want to make, and get behind Tammy Wilson and the cuts she wants to make.
Randy, thank you for the phone call. Greatly appreciate it, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So I got a couple of reactions to that. One, I like the motivational tool of getting people involved. That sounds good. But and the but is this. The but is we're hurting ourselves when we do that. Every dollar that goes out that's distributed in a permanent fund dividend generates $1.40 of income. If you look at the ICER analysis, $1.40 of income in the Alaska economy. Alaska's in a recession right now, right? And a recession is, by definition, lack of income, lack of dollars.
Lack of revenue being expended.
Right.
By families.
Right. In the economy. And so cutting the PFD, even if you save it, even if you don't, even if you're not spending it on government, even if you're saving it, you're hurting the Alaska economy. You're hurting all of us. You're worsening the recession rather than improving it. So, Randy, while I like the motivational aspects of tying a portion of the PFD to to how the state's doing on spending, the adverse effect it would have on the state's economy, I think, is too much to do that.
Randy brought up a term called low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look, and I've discussed this with you before in public forum, or brought up this question, the low-hanging fruit that the legislature wouldn't immediately cut was the capital budget, which is the infrastructure. And there's two types of people, and I'm on, depending on your economics, are you on the capital budget side or are you on the operating budget side? Everyone sort of looks at the operating budget as, oh my goodness. And we've decimated the capital budget, which puts more people to work, more construction projects, and builds up the infrastructure. So now the question I remember asking you is in your sustainable budget, does that include both the capital budget and the operating budget? And you said, yes, it has to. And I totally agree with that.
Yeah, it absolutely does. So the $4.1 billion we talk about as being the sustainable budget number would include both capital and operating.
Yeah, but the low-hanging fruit that they always talk about is the capital budget. That went from $2 billion down to what, $100 million? That's the first thing that happened. The low-hanging fruit. Yeah,
it's the easiest thing to cut, and it's all one-time money, right? So you're doing a capital project, and you've appropriated money for that. There's no ongoing obligation. There's no statute that says you have to keep
fund this in perpetuity.
Yeah, keep this program going. And it enabled in the first couple of years of this down cycle, it enabled people to avoid looking at the operating budget, which
the hard decisions,
right, which has grown tremendously. I mean, one example, this state has opted into every optional Medicaid option
everyone
that the federal government permits. The federal government, the Medicaid program is set up as mandatory. A portion of it's mandatory. A portion of it is optional. No state has opted into as many optional services as Alaska has. And each time we did, it was based on this theory. Oh, we get free federal money. If we spend a little bit of state money, we get free federal money. Well, the problem with that is we've now built up all these Medicaid programs that are costing Alaska about $300 million. There's the total spend on Medicaid, total, mandatory and optional, is $600 million. Half of our spend is to support optional programs that we don't have an obligation to do, but that we've done over time because we get free federal money associated with it.
Can we get out of them now?
Yes. Yeah, we can.
But not with this governor.
Well, it takes legislation because we have to roll back. I mean, we've created the statutory obligations to do it. We have to roll those back, and the governor would have to sign it. So if this governor wouldn't sign it, then no, we couldn't do it under this governor.
As I recall, Senator Kelly, as chairman of the Finance Committee last year, he made restructuring what they did and made a nice savings on that, I believe. So
he did. It's interesting. He did things that actually entitled Alaska to more federal money. I mean, the way they restructured it is they sort of reset some of these programs in a way that would attract more federal money. And so yes, we've reduced state spending, but we didn't reduce the programs, and we still are on the hook for at least a portion of all of these programs.
We're going to take one more phone call before we go to our commercial break. Good morning. You're on KFAR Problem Corner with Brad Keithley, and your name is?
Annie.
Hello, Annie. You have a question for Brad.
My understanding is that the permanent fund was created originally because we don't keep our mineral rights when we buy property. Is that correct or no?
Go ahead.
Annie, that is how some people view it. It's not how Hammond viewed it. Hammond viewed it as taking money off the table so the legislature didn't spend it. The permanent fund dividend, the distribution to individuals, does the same thing for the Alaska economy as mineral royalties do in the lower 48. When you have private mineral in the lower 48, you have private ownership of minerals, and private individuals get the royalty from the minerals, and they inject it into the local economy. We don't have that in Alaska because under the Statehood Act, the federal government required that the state retain ownership of the mineral interest, couldn't alienate it, sell it to individuals. So we don't have that same sort of impact on our local economy from mineral royalties. What Hammond envisioned in part was the permanent fund dividend would play that role. It's not really a substitute for us not being able to own, but it's to create the same economic impact.
Annie, that's a great question. Thank you very much. And Fairbanks, we're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be back. You're listening to KFAR Radio, 660 AM, and listening to Brad Keithley. Thank you.
Alaska's longest-running talk show. It's Problem Corner on KFAR, 660 AM.
Fox News Alert, I'm Pat O'Neill. A showdown looming over approval of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, with a key Senate panel just voting to send the nomination to the full Senate.
Republicans are now faced with making good on their threat to break a filibuster by forcing a simple majority vote by using the so-called nuclear option. This would be a major change in the way the Senate does business. But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has vowed to confirm Judge Gorsuch one way or the other.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland. President Trump hosting Egypt's president at the White House with the fight against Mideast and global terrorism one topic.
We are very much behind President el-Sisi. He's done a fantastic job in a very difficult situation.
They also reportedly touched on human rights matters and efforts to revive the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Russian media say authorities are seeking 2 suspects in today's St. Petersburg subway bombing. 10 people were confirmed dead. About 40 others were injured. Fox News. We report, you decide.
It's time for your Alaska News Minute.
An Anchorage-based utility company has secured natural gas for the next 16 years through a contract with a new producer. The Alaska Journal of Commerce reports that Chugach Electric Association and Fury Operating Alaska signed a gas sale and purchase agreement this month for Fury to provide at least 20% of the utility's natural gas needs through 2033. The Japanese energy company is dropping plans for a liquefied natural gas export facility at Port Mackenzie in the Matanuska-Susitna Borough north of Anchorage. Anchorage television station KTUU reports Tokyo-based Energy Resources, Inc., since 2011, has considered developing natural gas from Cook Inlet. The general manager of the company's Anchorage office says the project can no longer be supported because of market conditions. The flow of oil from an underwater pipeline leak discovered in Alaska's Cook Inlet over the weekend has been stopped, although it's not yet known how much crude poured into the water, posing a threat to wildlife. The Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation says the leak was discovered Saturday, coming from an 8-inch-wide pipeline that was carrying more than 19,000 gallons of crude oil.
Streaming live online at KFAR660.com.
Hey, Tony, thanks for coming. I got a really big job for you.
All right, how big we talking here?
Like, extra large.
Lou, please. No one does a Papa Murphy's pizza better than me.
When I say extra large, I'm talking about 16 inches of delicious thin crust, topping it off huge pepperoni slices, fistfuls of sausage and fresh Parmesan.
That's right. It's the brand new XL New York pizza from Papa Murphy's, available for a limited time for only $10 at either Fairbanks Papa Murphy's.
Make sure you bring me my cut, capiche?
It doesn't make sense to install windows in Alaska that were made for the lower 48. With freezing winters and powerful winds, the rugged climate that makes Alaska beautiful needs to be kept outside with windows designed for the challenge. That's why Capital Northern windows are built in the north for the north. Call us and discover how Capital Northern high-quality windows can help make your home quieter, more comfortable, and less expensive to heat. Capital Northern windows and doors, warmer by design.
Fairbanks, listen up. Everyone knows affordable used cars have been saving customers thousands when you buy a vehicle from Affordable Used Cars. But did you know Affordable could put more money in your pocket when selling your vehicle? That's right. If you're thinking about selling or even trading your vehicle at another dealer, bring it by Affordable first. We'll give you a quick 10-minute appraisal. That's all it takes to get the most money for your car, truck, or SUV. Come by today. Simple and easy. Affordable Used Cars on South Cushman.
Your new home is waiting at Birchwood Homes. Their 3, 4, and 5-bedroom units are move-in ready. Stop searching and get moving. They are a pet-friendly community that accepts all dog breeds, so no need to stress about Fido. Heat is included in your rent. Garages on every unit, and they're located right outside Fort Wainwright. Take Trainer Gate to F Street and follow the leasing signs, or visit birchwoodhomesak.com to learn more. Birchwood Homes, giving your family the warmest of welcomes.
Each and every weekday morning, tune into the KFAR Morning Show for the Daily Business Report. Keep up on the latest gold and silver prices, stay informed on crude oil prices, and get up-to-the-minute business news updates. The Daily Business Report on the KFAR Morning Show is brought to you by Alaska Rare Coins. When it comes to precious metals, you need a dependable source. And for 40 years, that source has been Alaska Rare Coins on 2nd Avenue. They're local, and you get real gold and real silver right there in your hand. Alaska Rare Coins, proud sponsor of the Daily Business Report on KFAR 660 AM, Local Talk Radio.
Welcome back, Fairbanks. You're listening to KFAR 660 AM Problem Corner. I am your host, David Pruhs, and we have Brad Keithley in the studio here, and we have a caller who's been waiting for a while, so we're going to go immediately to the caller.
Great.
Good morning. You're on Problem Corner with Brad Keithley, and your name is?
My name's Bill.
Good morning, Bill. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I have a comment and then a question. The comment is I was a resident at the time of the establishment of the permanent fund and voted on it. And there's been kind of a revisionism saying that the intent there was to have the earnings go to the government rather than the people of Alaska. If you look at, there wasn't any other option, a third option that would have stated that directly. It was left unspecified as to what was to become with that. And so people could say, well, I'll vote for it because I want school teachers to be well funded, or other people would say, well, I'll vote for it to keep it out of the hands of the legislature, which was the option that was at the time.
Bill, what's your question for Brad?
And my question for Brad is that one of the great tragedies is that the Susitna Dam was never built. What's your comment on the development in the form of, I think it's about an $8 billion Susitna Dam project? I'll hang up, listen to your response.
Thank you, Bill.
Well, thanks for the question. Good question. Susitna Dam would have been hugely expensive. It would have certainly produced electricity. It would have reduced the state's demand on fuel oil, or reliance on fuel oil, and on natural gas. It would have benefited that way. But I was part of going through the economics in this most recent revival of looking at Susitna Dam. And you've got to project really high natural gas and oil prices to last for a very long time, and project the dam to be producing energy for about 100 years for the economics of that dam to pencil out. The capital costs of that dam are so high, at least in this last analysis, are so high that you've got to make those sorts of assumptions to make it work.
You know, Bill brought up something that I liked, and we had it from Ann too, the caller, revisionism, the thoughts of revisionism, and everyone was thinking that, since the economics of the state have changed and they're looking at the permanent dividend, people have been saying, well, that was Hammond's thought of since depletion of state's minerals directly to the people. And you sort of corrected everyone.
Yeah, so there was a lot of stuff said at the time of the vote on the permanent fund, on the amendment to the Constitution to create the permanent fund, and there's a lot of different people voted for different reasons. I mean, Bill's correct on why some people voted. He's correct on the fact they weren't specific to get a lot of people, thinking the money was going to be theirs. But I've spent a lot of time going back into Hammond's writings, both the contemporary writings around the time and the writings that he did subsequent, to try to understand. And I've talked to people like Clintillion and Rick Halford and others who were around.
I've had Sterling Gallagher on the show too, and he was the one who wrote it at the direction of the governor.
Yeah, but I think the most consistent and the most economically, the most economic foresight that I think I've come across is Hammond's vision of 50-50, half to the people. And people talk about, we need an economic stimulus package. Well, that's what the PFD is. I mean, that's
on an annual basis.
That's the function it serves. And it produces, I keep going back to this number, but it's a hugely important number. It produces $1.4 of Alaska income for every dollar that's distributed in the PFD. Capital projects, I love capital projects. They're good things. But for every dollar we spend on a capital project, we only generate 65 cents of Alaska income. 35 cents of it goes out of state immediately to pay for things like steel and other specialty products. So if you look at if you've got $1 in Alaska government, and you give and you're looking at either distributing it as a PFD or a capital project, you're looking at, when you distribute it as a PFD, you're going to generate $1.40 of income for Alaska's in the Alaska economy. If you spend it as a capital dollar, you're only going to generate 65 cents. So you need to understand the economic impact.
Yeah. What if you spend it on the operating budget?
So the operating budget, that means you're either spending it on people or you're spending it on programs that ultimately employ people. That's about $1.30. But Scott Goldsmith, again, did a study on this back in the early 2010, 2011 time period when we were first starting to face this issue. And Goldsmith went back through time and he said, look, the marginal dollar over time would have been spent on capital projects. It wouldn't have been spent on additional operating budgets. That marginal dollar that would have been retained and then spent by government had it not been gone out in the form of a PFD would have been spent on capital projects. So I think Hammond had a huge amount of economic foresight. Hammond and others, Sterling and others, had a huge amount of economic foresight, saying half in the hands of Alaska citizens, let them make the economic decision of where to spend it. Half to government when oil's no longer sufficient, let them make the decision about where to spend it. But half and half. One of my problems with what the Senate has done is they've taken that half and half, and they're now saying, oh, it's 25-75, 25 to the people, 75 to government. Well, that's just the nose under the camel's tent. The next time we have this, it's going to be, well, 80-20 isn't that bad. No, 85-15 isn't that bad.
Where do they stop?
Yeah, exactly right. Hammond had it right at 50-50. He had the economic balance, the impact on the state right at 50-50. We need to stick with that.
Okay. We've talked about what the House and Senate and the governor's doing, and the impact of an income tax is maybe what we should start looking at now. Now, I am adamantly opposed to an income tax, and especially this one, because I look at it as a economic, how do I want to describe this? They're going to take the top 15 corporations in the state of Alaska with their current bill. Out of those top 15, 14 of them will not be taxed because they're native corporations. And so they're leaving $15 billion on the table untaxed. So they're pushing down the amount of people and corporations that will be taxed. So it's what I call economic discrimination. I believe I'm fine with the native corporations not paying a tax. I am very fine with that. And now in the newest version, they're taxing the dividends of individual natives at 2.5%. So that tells me, okay, if you can tax the individual dividend of an Alaskan native, you can then tax their corporation. Well, I'm adamantly opposed to all of it, but these are just some of the things I'm just going nuts over.
Yeah, the problem with an income tax is the same problem as with the PFD. Not quite as severe. When you look at the numbers, the impact of an income tax isn't as bad as cutting the PFD, isn't quite as bad. But you're still taking money out of the private economy and moving it over to government. And government, we talked about capital projects, we talked about other things, the way government spends money. When you move it over to government, it's less efficient spending. It's producing less bang for the buck in the economy. You're producing less overall income in the economy. Plus, you're taking the decision out of individuals and their ability to select who gets the dollars, and putting it over in the hands, frankly, of a very select few in government who get to choose
what is funded.
Yeah, exactly right.
And it's their economic stimulus to their thought or philosophy, or even worse, ideology.
Yeah, exactly right. It becomes, it leads to things like what some countries call crony capitalism, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to fund this project because it happens to be my donor's project, or I'm going to fund this project because it produces, I don't really care what the economic impact is overall, it produces a lot of jobs in my particular district, or it produces a lot of jobs among my constituents. You're undermining the very successful American system of free market, and you're replacing it with a system you see much more often in places like Angola or Azerbaijan, socialist countries.
Yeah.
And that's my problem, both with the income tax, that you're taking it out of the private economy and you're taking it out of the hands of individuals, and with the PFD cut, because it's the same thing. The impact's the same.
And what got me is last year they were saying, well, if we had an income tax, we would generate $30 million in revenue from out-of-state workers. Now, there was a House on the Senate, in the House Finance, there was a bill to make the maritime workers, an 80-20. 80% of them had to be local residents. And the Democrats voted that amendment down for local hire. Here you are talking about local hire. Here you are talking about the out-of-state workers who take the money and run south, and that's always been an Alaskan issue anyway. And here, finally, you have a local hire. Let's put it in our operating budget on state workers on the maritime, and it gets voted down by the Democrats.
Yeah.
I just sort of shook my head and said, "You lost me. You lost me right there."
Yeah, it's we've let a lot of things get in the way of us thinking through how we support the Alaska economy. I mean, the Alaska economy, again, going back to the capital budget, $1 spent on the capital budget, good thing. Infrastructure is a good thing, but 35 cents of that dollar goes out of state immediately. We need to focus on the Alaska economy, not just on, dollars in the world. We need to focus on ourselves.
There you go. We're going to take another phone call here before we take a break. Good morning. You're on KFAR Problem Corner with Brad Keithley, and your name is?
Jorgie Jorgensen.
Jorgie, how are you doing?
Well, I'm still alive, that's all.
That's wonderful, sir. How you doing? Besides being wonderfully alive, and your history at Fairbanks is incredible, do you have a question for Mr. Keithley here?
I have a question. He is talking strong on trying to keep Alaska going, and here's one question I've never been able to get from anybody that knows a lot about the oil companies. Number one, they have their own airline. They got 3 brand new jets. They've had their own airline since pretty much oil was struck on the North Slope, because I was at North Slope when the oil was hit.
And you probably were a pilot for them at one time or another, or knew all the pilots.
That's not why I'm calling. I'm calling to try to find out how come they have their own airline and they got their own airport up there. On the figures that I ran last year, their airline, with the passengers they haul back and forth, and it's just their airline, they are getting, if they took the regular price of $850 round trip between Prudhoe Bay and Anchorage, that airplane is getting $68,000 per flight hour. Now, if you bring it down to reality, the price should be about $500 between Anchorage and Prudhoe Bay and back. The realistic figure would be $500, and that would be bringing in $43,000 per flight hour. So their airline is accumulating roughly just a little over 3 hours per flight hour per aircraft per year. And my question is we could that would bring a lot of economy to the airlines in Alaska if they ran these passengers back and forth and keep the money percolated here with the airlines that operate in Alaska. And that is my question to your guest.
Thank you, Jorgie. You have a great day.
Yep.
So the answer to that, he's talking about shared services, which is they do own, the companies own an effort called shared services, and they fly their employees back and forth up to the slope. They do that for their own economic reasons. They can operate, they believe they can operate, get their employees up there and get them back cheaper that way than they can if they would use Alaska Air or other flight services to get up there. Jorgie raises a very good question, though, which
very
is
astute man, yeah.
Which is the knock-on effect. Could we reduce the cost to everybody else if we had the oil companies going through the airlines? Would that produce enough revenue if they could lower the fares for everybody else? Would it expand services for everybody else? That's actually a very good question, and one I've never thought through.
Don't you think Alaska Airlines should be having that discussion with them?
Alaska Airlines probably has had that discussion with them over time. I mean, there's special things they need. They need it on a certain schedule. They need to be able to get their people out. They need the flexibility if there's weather issues coming up. So that would be some operational side issues. But the real driver is the economics, and yeah, that'd be an interesting conversation between Alaska Airlines and the companies.
Fairbanks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. You're listening to the 660 AM KFAR Problem Corner. I'm your host, David Pruhs, and we have Brad Keithley in the station here. You can reach us at 458-TALK, 458-8255, and we'll be right back.
Alaska's longest-running talk show. It's Problem Corner on KFAR 660 AM.
Hi,
Hi, Fairbanks. I'm Brad Keithley with Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, where we are fighting for the Alaska economy and families. Last week, the Alaska Senate voted to cut your PFD in half, largely at the urging of special interests which benefit from government spending that want the money to go in their pockets instead of yours. Now the Alaska House is even considering an income tax on top of that. These actions take more than $1,000 each year out of your pocket and that of every Alaskan, man, woman, and child, giving it to government to spend instead of you, making the Alaska economy more government-run than ever before. We believe that is taking Alaska in the wrong direction. If you agree, now is the time to let your legislators know you want to preserve the PFD as it is. Call, email, or text them, post it on Facebook, or even tweet it. Let them know you want the PFD to stay in your pocket rather than given to special interests.
We sure got a lot of snow this winter, and a lot of it got tracked into your house. Now that spring is here, it's time to clean all that up with the help from Fairbanks Clean Pro. Don't steam your carpets, clean your carpets with Fairbanks Clean Pro's citrus-based organic solution. Safe for kids, pets, and allergy sufferers. Carpets stay cleaner for longer, and they'll dry within 1 to 2 hours, not 1 to 2 days. Fairbanks Clean Pro offers residential and commercial carpet cleaning. Call today for a free estimate. 388-7768. That's 388-7768.
Local news and talk is just a click away. Download the KFAR app from your app store. Just search KFAR 660 and listen wherever you go.
Today's weather brought to you by the Eye Clinic of Fairbanks. For over 45 years, providing complete medical and surgical eye care and prescription vision care, the Eye Clinic of Fairbanks, your eye health professionals on Minnie Street.
KFAR weather.
Look for mostly sunny skies this afternoon with high temperatures in the mid-40s. Tonight, increasing clouds with lows near 20 above. Tomorrow for Tuesday, patchy freezing fog in the morning, partly sunny skies in the afternoon with high temperatures near 50. And as we look ahead to Wednesday, partly sunny once again with high temperatures near 45. This has been a look at your latest Fairbanks area weather forecast.
And now, more Problem Corner on 660 AM KFAR.
Welcome back, Fairbanks. We're in the studio here with Brad Keithley. And Brad, that last caller, Georgie Jorgensen, brought a very astute question. You know, we were talking about the economics of in-state work. Yep. And yet here, he hit it right on the head, it sounds like. Why is the oil companies using a private plane company when someone else could be doing it cheaper, and that's...
Well, it was an extremely astute question, and it was a great follow-up to the riff I'd just gone off on looking out for the Alaska economy. As I said, the reason the companies do it that way is because they believe that there's a cost efficiency in doing that, and because they believe that they need some operational controls that having their own airline accommodates. But he's right. I mean, if there was a way of negotiating a deal between Alaska and the companies in a way that expanded service to the slope and reduced cost for others, that would be a plus to the Alaska economy. So if Alaska Airlines is listening, have that discussion.
Do they even fly directly out of Fairbanks anymore?
Does Alaska Airlines?
No.
Oh, shared services?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know, David. I don't keep that good a track of shared services.
Oh, okay. Well, we're in the last 6 minutes of our program, and looking at what you do and what you've done, you've brought a lot of insight in the way this revenue economy from the state of Alaska should be done. Is the state house, senator, or governor's office listening to you? Or are they afraid to listen to you?
So here's my take on what's going on down in Juneau. Government has sort of closed in to protect itself, right? I mean, that's
natural. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, you're right.
And so they say we've got all these programs, and there's a constituent for every dollar, and they'll show up and they'll be upset if we try to cut. And so they've sort of closed in to protect themselves. And one of the downsides of having the legislature in Juneau is that they're in a company town. They're in the state government company town. So when they go to the restaurant, or when they go out for coffee, or when they go to the grocery store, the people they're interacting with, by and large, are government people or government economy related people, and they're all reinforcing that. And so they've sort of to some degree, they've sort of stopped thinking about the overall Alaska economy. They're trying to respond to all these people who save my program, or have a capital budget, or save that other program, or don't cut schools. And they've turned to the side of thinking about revenue. They're not thinking about the impact of these things on the overall Alaska economy. And so the disagreements I have with them, I like Pete Kelly, I like John Coghill, believe me. But the disagreements I have with them is that they've become too insular, they've become too government focused, they've become too self-protective of government, and they've gone to the revenue side much earlier than I think they need to. If you go back and look at oil prices go up, oil prices go down, revenues go up, revenues go down. The goal is to keep a sustainable line, a steady line, charted through that course, not following up and not following down, but staying through that course. I think that approach works. And when you look at the savings we have, including the earnings reserve account, which Hammond intended to be available for government when oil wasn't sufficient during some periods, I think we have enough revenue. I think we have enough savings to get us through this low price cycle without going to the dark side of income taxes and PFD cuts and taking money out of the private economy.
You know, I always say that if you put 20 legislators in a room and ask them what they should do in regards to the budget and sustainability, you're going to have 20 different programs. So anyway, we're going to take another phone call. Good morning. You're on KFAR Problem Corner, and your name is?
Hello, Bill. How are you?
Good, Bill. And yourself?
Fine. Brad, good guy. I'm just so smart, and I listen to your shows on Saturday with Michael. Listen, I'm looking at the Declaration of Rights in Article 1 of our Constitution. Mm-hmm. Source of government. All political power is inherent in the people. All government originates with the people, is founded upon their will only, and is instituted solely for the good of the people as a whole. So how is taking the permanent fund away and then putting a sales tax and income tax on it, take the rest of our permanent fund away, doing anything good for the people as a whole and not just the university? And when you had the Constitutional Convention in 56, if you looked at the list of the people who was there, Vic Fisher and his wife Vic worked for BLM as a planner and then went to work for the university. So here these people planning themselves to death, and they're still holding us to the fire today in their planning positions with all the local governments and tying us up. So if they're not doing it as a whole, the people, then why are they doing it? Because they're not doing what the Declaration of Rights, Article 1 says, paragraph number 2, source of government. So thank you very much, Brad, and what do you think about that?
Thank you, Bill. Great question.
Well, it is a great question, and the answer any legislator would give you is, well, I'm doing it for my constituents. The problem is we've had good times in this state where constituents were able to go to government for, give me $1,000 for this particular program, or help support this particular program or that particular program, expand Medicaid. Let's build 2 new engineering schools, one at UAF, one at UAA. Let's build a new athletic arena at UAA. And legislators, everybody just went to government. That was their solution for everything. And so they told themselves it was for the good of the people because all these constituents are coming in asking for these programs. Now we can no longer afford that. We need to cut it back, but they're still looking at these constituents. They're still looking at people who are coming into their offices and say, well, save this program. You established this program, and we need to save it now. So they're still looking at these individualized constituents. If I have one enduring criticism of Juneau, it's that they're not looking out for the state economy as a whole. They're looking out for all these little micro economies.
There's all the little fiefdoms that have built up.
Exactly right. And the governor's, subject to that too. I mean, he wants to save certain programs, so he's, he doesn't want to cut the budget further. I think going back to the Constitution, that provision in the Constitution is a good thing to do, but we've got to convince 21
out of the 40 in the House and
11 in the Senate that's what they need to be doing.
And one in the executive office.
Well, that's true. Unless you convince a lot more in the House and the Senate to override any vetoes. But yeah.
That is true. Down to our last minute, any closing thoughts of what will happen down in Juneau with the budget?
I've got a lot of thoughts, but what I want to spend the minute on is to encourage people to talk to their legislators. Don't just think that they've got it thought through. They're responding to special interests that are down in Juneau. You need to become one of those. If you think the Alaska economy needs the PFD, if we need to avoid an income tax, if we need to continue to keep money in the hands of the people as opposed to the government, tell your legislator that. Counter the paid lobbyists that are down in Juneau. Let them know that you think we ought to keep money in the hands of the people.
Brad, thank you very, very much for being on here. I want to get you back on the summer after the legislature has adjourned, if it does happen, so we can do a recap on what's happened and how it's going to affect us. Fairbanks, thank you very much.